Hello, everybody. You're listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. This is Catherine Carrigan. You can find out more about me at catherinecarrigan.com, unlimitedenergynow.com, and what is social media today. I am a medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. Now, today, our guest is Adrienne. Jean is the developer of InnerSpeak, a method for clearing karmic and ancestral blocks. She's the author of 4 books and 2 decks of oracle healing and activation cards. Jean is a very powerful healer. She works with clients globally via phone, Skype, and Zoom, as well as in her office in Tallahassee, Florida. You can find out more about Adrienne on her website, jeanadrienne.com, and that's JeanAdrienne.com. Welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you, Catherine. I am just honored to be a guest on your show.
Well, I'm so happy that you're here. Jean is one of the most powerful natural healers that I know. Now, Jean, how did you get on this path, this journey?
Well, I would have to say that this all started for me with a healing crisis of my own. I think maybe that's what gets most of us onto our path. But I was having anger management issues. It wasn't like that I had disease or, some sort of physical thing going on, but I was having problems with curtailing my anger. And for people who know me, most people would say, God, Jean, you've got the world's longest fuse. You let everything happen around you and you just kind of like go with the flow. But that wasn't the case back in the day. And let's just say it was jeopardizing my job. And I was a single mom with 2 kids in high school and college. I couldn't afford to be without a job. And the director of engineering at the technology firm where I was a salesperson, actually, he told me never to come back in his office again. So, you've got to know it was getting pretty bad. I was going home from work probably every day or every other day, running home on my lunch hour to wash my face and put on new makeup because something would have set me off and I would have run screaming and crying into a bathroom, or had to go get in my car and leave, and this was just not me. And so I didn't know. I mean, I thought I was losing my mind was a big piece of it. I didn't really what was going on. And at that point, I was doing a cleanse with my natural doctor that I did every year. Every year in the spring, she would do a 30-day cleanse, and she would have, all of us would come together on a Saturday. We would talk about the cleanse and la, 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 la. So on the lunch break, we were all sitting around talking about what's some weirdest, strangest kind of healing sort of thing you've ever done. And this lady said, well, I went to this energy worker guy and he changed my life. And that stuck with me. I mean, when somebody said that something's changed their life, it gets your attention. And so I got the guy's name and I wrote his name down in the back of my checkbook register. And when all of this anger stuff came to an eruption, and we were talking like Mount Vesuvius one day, and I really did almost lose my job over that whole thing. I went and looked and I found that, and I called the man, and luckily I got him on the phone and I asked him, what do you do? And he said, I can't tell you what I do. You just come have the session, and if you want or don't. So I had a session with him, and he used a kinesiology-based tool. And at the end of that hour, I was Jean again. I was peaceful. I was calm. And, and I thought, okay, well, that's just one of those lucky things. But I kept going back to him for other issues. And pretty soon I realized that wasn't just an accident. This was the synchronistic way things were working. And so I asked him, I said, so are you a psychic or something? And he said, no, I was a stockbroker before I learned how to do this, And I said, well, then, okay, sign me up. I want to learn to do what you do. And so I started studying with this guy for 9 months. I learned kinesiology. I learned his way of doing clearings. And that went along for a while. And then one night I was driving home from a meeting in my car, and I heard a voice. And mind you, I'd never heard voices before. And that voice told me that I was done with that work, that it was time for me to bring in my own. And I'm like, what? I started arguing with spirit, if you can do that and get away with it. And very soon thereafter, I began to open a channel. I didn't even know what channeling was. And I received this healing modality. And, and it's a big, thick book. I don't happen to have it in my office, or I would show it to you. But it's 144 files of information. And each of those files contains 36 pieces of information. And I use kinesiology, muscle testing, to allow a person's higher self to say, well, Catherine needs the 5th piece of information on page 92 and the 20th piece of information on page 13, and weaves the healing story that way. And then after the story's been defined, and we all know we're not our story, then the work will say, and this is what you need to do to let it go. This clearing, this clearing, this clearing, etc. Until all of a sudden I'll say, okay, are we supposed to do another clearing? Yes or no? And it will say, no more clearing. And that's when I know that we're done. So that's sort of from a really quick rendition from soup to nuts of how I got to where I am today, because this is how I make my living. I work with clients every day, but also along the way I've started writing. And like you said, I've written 4 books. I'm working on the 5th one right now. And I've created 2 decks of oracle cards.
Yeah, very powerful. And you're right. I didn't know that story, and to hear that you used to be an angry person is a surprise to me. And it really shows that this natural healing stuff actually does indeed work. I will have to say, I remember the first time I personally did a liver detox. And I remember I was just taking a little bottle of these liver herbs. And I would wake up every morning and journal about how angry I was. And as you and I know, the emotions of anger and rage are held in our liver and gallbladder.
Absolutely.
When you start detoxifying, that stuff comes out, for which it needs to come out, but hopefully it's going to come out in a healthy, productive way. So, Jean, tell everyone about your books and where they can find your books.
Sure. So my books are all on Amazon. And the first book that I wrote was called Soul Adventures. It's autobiographical. The second one was called Reframe Your World. And it's the story of how I came through a life crisis, basically, and figured out more about my truth and who I really was. I mean, back in the day, they would have said I'd had a nervous breakdown, because I literally had a meltdown in a parking lot of a grocery store for no good reason other than the fact that it was time. And I was crying and I couldn't stop crying. And I needed to go in and buy my groceries so that I could go home and cook dinner. And I couldn't get out of the car because the tears wouldn't stop. And I'm thinking to myself, I have nothing to be upset about. I have nothing to be sad about. I have a good life. I've got a good marriage, so I thought, and all that, And finally, what I realized was that the reason I was crying was because I was scared. Because, that fear is kind of like the underlying emotion of anger. It's the underlying emotion of sadness, and, you name it. Fear is the bedrock of all of it. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had grown so much after that healing crisis and after I started getting on my path and doing what I came here to do that I didn't know. I couldn't even recognize my own energy signature. And if I didn't know who I was anymore, you can bet your bottom dollar that my now ex-husband had no clue. And consequently the marriage went by the boards because I grew out of that. It served me for the time, and then I grew out of it.
I think what's so beautiful about your story is that, basically what you're talking about is a breakdown into a breakthrough.
Yes.
And, it's very important for those of us who do natural healing. And excuse me, I had to pick up my puppy here, who always seems to like to interrupt our interviews, so not getting enough attention. And so these breakdowns to breakthroughs, are often full of a lot of emotion. And, so if you're out there listening and watching and you're going through this, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just may mean you're reorganizing into a higher level.
Yeah.
I always like to talk about chaos theory. Chaos theory, Ilioprignogine, Nobel Prize winning research. In order to move to a higher level, you have to go into chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So you told us about 2 of your books. What about your other books?
Okay, so the third book is called Power Tools, and it's actually a series of tools that you can use to assist you in growing your consciousness. And what I did was I took everyday common tools like the vacuum cleaner and the Xerox machine and the magnet and things like that. But I use them and I couch them in a metaphysical way of how you can use those to break up the bedrocks of your beliefs that aren't serving you anymore and move into higher levels of consciousness. So that's book number 3. Book number 4 is a compilation book. It's called Realities of Creation. And I had this brainstorm one day that I was pretty good at conscious creation. If I wanted to manifest something, more often than not, I could get what I was trying to manifest, but it wasn't cookie cutter. I couldn't say for sure that every time I set my intention to create something, I'm actually going to get what I asked for. So I found a bunch of other people, actually on the internet, that were subject matter experts in areas of conscious creation. And we put together a telesummit, and we called it the Realities of Creation. And so it was 9 different women talking about their 9 unique ways of consciously creating what they want in their reality. And so as an outcropping of that, we actually wrote a book that got picked up by a major mainstream publisher. And so that was book number 4.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
And, I was working with a client yesterday, and we were talking about the way he needs to manifest.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do believe that each of us has a different manifestation process. Just like as a writer or as a creative person, each person is going to have a little different way that they do best in creating.
Exactly.
And so it's really helpful, I think, to understand the way that you create. And so, for example, when I was working with my client yesterday, he needed to feel it first, to feel into the reality of what he wanted and what he was wanting to create. Then he needed to see it. And then he needed to go into his knowing about what the action step is.
Yeah.
So
that was the beauty of this book, was because that anybody could pick it up and would probably resonate with at least one of the 9, if not all of the 9, and know that, okay, these are tools that I can use. Because I'm all about tools, and providing tools. And then, bunched in with all of that, then I created these cards. The first ones I created were the Inner Speak cards, and they're basically a very small subset of the full protocol of Inner Speak that anybody can use to clear the things that are holding them back. And then the other deck that I created has to do with DNA, and they're called Reconnecting Soul, 142 DNA activation cards.
Wonderful. Now, Jean, what is the relationship between your soul, and your body?
So that's a great segue into the book I'm working on now, because the body, I think we've all been told over time, everybody who's on this path, that we're not our body. But how many of us really understand what that means? Most people don't. And we all, I think, can agree that we have a soul, because we're also told that from small childhood. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Your body has a soul as well. This is a holographic universe, as above, so below, as within, so without. And so if I've got a soul, then every cell of my body must have a soul, and my body itself must have a soul. And so it wasn't until I actually had a, how can we call this, a life-changing event last year. I was at a fundraiser for a nonprofit that I was the chairman of the board for, and I was merrily walking through the woods on a zombie walk to raise money for a women's shelter. And I tripped on a root, and I went flying through the air, and I impaled my left side of my face on a root. And it was a pretty severe injury. It basically peeled my face off. It ruptured my eye globe. The lens in my eye was lost, and to the point that I actually had to be life flown on a helicopter to a trauma center that was 2.5 hours away. Actually, 20 minutes by helicopter, but 2.5 hours from where I live. And that could have been a situation that cost me my life, because they did emergency surgery to put me back together and to remove half of the forest from my head. So the odds of getting infection were very high, and they were they were more worried about that than they were whether or not I was going to lose my eye. So, and as it turned out, the surgeon was an amazing guy, and he saved my life and he saved my eye. So, that's all good. But I was pretty much kind of on my back for about 6 weeks, recovering from the trauma, not because I couldn't get up and move around, but the trauma was so intense on my body. All of my energy bodies were involved in this healing process. And basically all I could really do for a month was lay in the bed and sleep. I was sleeping between 12 and 20 hours a day, just, allowing my body that space to recover. Well, had a lot of time to commune with my angels, my guides, and my body. And as an outcropping of that, I realized, wow, my body, because I asked her, I said, okay, what happened? Why did this happen? And she said, well, I didn't feel connected anymore, and I didn't want to stay here. I was ready to go back to the earth, because, our body is of the earth. It's a nature spirit. It's an earth being. And she was ready to go home, which, in other words, die. Of course, that wasn't, where my soul was connected, but we had never talked before. So I had no idea that my body was feeling so disconnected. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I didn't know that she had plans, things that she wanted to do, that I never tapped into that before. So this was a huge awakening, I think, for both of us, my body and myself. And so as part of this, she said, you've been a teacher now for 20 years. Well, it's my turn now. I want to be a teacher. And I'm thinking, okay, then how's that going to work for you, honey? Because I think I'm the feet on the road here, even though you might be the feet. How are you going to be the teacher? I didn't quite get it, but I didn't argue with her. And maybe a few days later, I just got out of the shower, and I was standing in front of the mirror in my bathroom, blow drying my hair. And I heard very clearly my body telling me, it's time for you to write my book. And I'm like, oh, okay. She said, yeah, I'll dictate it. You write it, I'll dictate it, and then we'll use it to teach. So this book that I'm working on is called Our Sentient Body. And it is insight from my body about how things work in her perspective. So that she can share that with other bodies out there whose souls will resonate with the book, pick it up and read it, and learn from the body's perspective how things work in her reality or his reality, depending on whether it's a male body or a female body.
Yeah, and you bring up something really important, and something that I think that is actually available to all of us, which is that we can communicate with different aspects of ourselves, and we can actually listen to our body. Whether it's something as simple as I'm hungry, or I'm full, or I need to move around more, or I need more rest. Yeah. And when we, people talk about this mind-body connection, and as we listen more intently to our physical body, we can experience greater levels of vitality.
Yes.
Now, Jean, in your opinion, where does dis-ease come from?
Well, it comes from not accepting what's going on around you. And, so I'm sure that the people who are watching this are now going, okay, what does she mean by that? So, we don't have to agree with everything that's going on, everything that happens in our reality, but we have to acknowledge and accept that it is happening. When we stick our head in the sand and let things just happen around us and not accept them, what happens is we internalize them. It's going to get processed at some point in time. So it's going to get stuffed somewhere. And our bodies are very organized. What I'm finding is our body's very organized about where it will stuff stuff. Its two favorite trash bins are your chakra system and your acupuncture meridian system. Mm-hmm. And within those, it's got certain things that it wants to put in this chakra and other things it wants to put in this chakra. And because each of our chakras has a front and a back aspect, a yin and a yang aspect. So some things that would go in the heart center, for example, the body would put particular aspects of woundings into the front of the heart center. Some of them would go in the back of the heart center. Very, very organized. And the same thing goes with the acupuncture meridian points. Each of those acupuncture meridian points, I've found out through the years, has the ability to hold an emotional block. And it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. This particular emotional block will fit into this particular acupuncture point, and only that one. It won't fit into this gallbladder point over here. It's only going to fit into this particular lung point. So
yeah, and the emotional anatomy has been discussed by numerous authors, and talking about, like we started out talking about, you hold anchor in your liver and your gallbladder. Mm-hmm. And when your liver and gallbladder is toxic, guess what? It's not just the junk you've been eating.
Right. Yeah. It's all that other stuff. Yeah. Right. So what happens is this stuff gets stored. And when it gets stored, it's outside in. So it's first going to get stored way out in your field, in your spiritual body, if you will. And because each of those etheric bodies is an etheric duplicate of this physical body, they're etheric acupuncture meridians and they're etheric chakras. So it's going to start clogging up the chakra systems or the acupuncture systems way out in your spiritual body. And then if you don't deal with it, it's going to come closer and it's going to get into your mental body. And if you don't deal with it there, it's going to get into your emotional body. And then finally, if you haven't dealt with it up to that point, and trust me, you get signals all along the way. Your body's trying to go, whoa, we got something going on here and you're not paying attention. Eventually it's going to get into the physical body. And then you end up with anger and problems in your liver or gallstones that are clogging up your gallbladder. And it gets really painful at that point.
And personally, Jean, I find things, energy healing practices like yoga, Tai Chi, and Qigong, which are self-care practices that basically clear out our chakras and clear out our energy field and our acupuncture system, are profoundly healing. It's not just exercise.
Right.
So what other, in addition to yoga, Tai Chi, and Qigong, for our listeners and viewers, what other ways of keeping your energy field clear do you recommend?
Well, so you can, an easy one is one that you teach as well, which is meditation. You can go into meditation, and while you're there, you can tap in to your different body systems and release things that, because they'll bubble up, in meditation. But there are all manner of healing tools and practitioners that you can avail yourself of. No different than Catherine and myself. I would love to say I'm the be all and the end all and you need to come to me, but that's not how it works, because there are tons of us out there. Reiki, for example, is a very relaxing tool, and you don't even really have to participate. You just lay there and the practitioner runs energy through your body that will clear that out. So yeah, there's lots of stuff that can be done to help you get rid of your stuff that's not serving you anymore.
Yeah. Now, Jean, how do you think fear keeps us from healing?
Well, because what it does is it acts like a giant roadblock. And, and it's really interesting how insidious fear can be. And it can completely derail you when you are on purpose. You're doing what you came here to do. You're operating from a higher vision. Fear pulls you back down into that small self, and it does it just like that. And it happened to me so quickly just in the last few weeks. That I'll share this little story with you because it's a perfect example of how fear can derail you. So, I've been a metaphysician and a spiritual teacher and healer now for 20 years. And I work with clients all over the world. And I'm real sure and convinced in what my personal truth is, up to the point that I know that anytime I think that I'm this close to what the truth is, I find out that the truth is really something outside that, and I have to expand my view to look bigger, because the truth is always a process. It's a moving process. So I come down to move back to my hometown of Tallahassee, Florida, and I came here to be of support to my daughter who's going through a healing process. And my daughter is extremely involved in fundamental Christianity. But in order to be able to sort of, play on her field, I've been, spending time with her, which means going to church with her on Sundays. And so, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody who's viewing this, but part of this has been listening to the Baptist theology for the last several months. And what I began to realize and this really just hit me yesterday, was that I had started to doubt what I knew to be true, because I had been hearing all of this fear-based stuff about, if you don't do this, you're going to be damned into eternal hell, and you miss the opportunity for eternal life, and blah 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 blah. And then I had started thinking, oh my God, what if I've got it all wrong, and what if they've got it right?
Yes. What if I start dancing and I end up going to hell?
Yeah, that one. So, what I began to realize was that I had let fear wiggle its little way into my reality and undermine my own personal truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It happened to the best of us.
Yeah. I remember when I was studying medical intuition, and a lot of times, as you know, when you're studying healing work, you never really know what you're going to learn. And I remember going in one day and the teacher saying, okay, today we're going to clear out all our fear. And I just almost started laughing, like, well, we'll be here for the next century. And, because there's layers of fear, some of which we're aware of, and some of which we have just pushed down into our suppressed, awareness.
Oh, yeah. And you have to really be careful what you ask for when you do that, because I can remember, it's probably been 3-4 years now, that one morning I got up and I was feeling really full of myself. And I said, okay, Spirit, today I ask you to please release me from all my fear. Yeah. Well, guess what? My life went cartwheeling out of control. Everything fell apart. Relationship ended. All of it. It's just like there wasn't an area of my life that was left unscathed from that.
Yeah. And you're just left with trust, right?
Yeah.
And connection to spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, but it takes a while to get down to that point. It really puts you to your knees,
Yeah. So, Jean, tell us what you've learned about DNA, what it is, how we can activate all of it, and how we can support our DNA in creating what we desire.
Okay, yeah. So my relationship with DNA happened again. It was the second time I was called into channel. and I was driving in my car, and I get all my best messages either in my car or in the shower. Okay, so I'm driving in my car, and I heard that same voice that told me that I was done with the other kinesiology work, and it said, "Today I want to talk to you about DNA." And I was like, okay, I've got an hour drive, go for it. And so the voice proceeded to tell me that at one point in human evolution, we had well more than 2 strands of DNA that medical science shows that we have now. And he said, in fact, you had 144 strands of DNA. And he said, what happened was that there was another civilization, he didn't explain, I've later figured it out, but there's another civilization that was going extinct because they had lost their ability to procreate, because they had damaged their planet, they had damaged their bodies, and it was kind of like, okay, what are we doing to ourselves here on planet Earth now? But anyway, but they were very technologically advanced. And so they started traveling through the galaxies looking for a species that had enough DNA that they could repair their DNA and still not wipe out the other species. And so they came here. I'm pretty sure that this stuff is actually historically documented in the Bible, because it talks about when the giants came and mated with men in the Old Testament of the Bible. And I'm guessing that that's sort of what was going on there. But anyway, I don't know how long it took or exactly how this happened, but at some point in time, they left and they were able to save their civilization. And at the same time, we've been just fine for all of these many millions, thousands, dozens, I don't know how many years, with 2 strands of DNA. And so what my guide told me was that what you guys didn't realize was that associated with every strand of DNA is an aspect of consciousness. And so you shared your DNA lovingly and willingly, but guess what? You gave away your gifts at the same time. So it's time for you guys to wake up. And in order to do that, you're going to have to go back and find all your DNA. And because there is no such thing as loss in the divine plan, it's all there. It's in one of your other dimensional aspects, and all you've got to do is ask and intend that these strands of DNA be reactivated. And so what he said was, in your job, if you choose to accept it, Gina, is going to be to draw 142 pictures. Each of those will hold the frequency and the energy of a latent strand of DNA, as well as the frequency of the gift. And so people can look at those pictures, they can meditate on them, they can ask that strand of DNA be activated for them. And of course I argued and I said, well, I don't draw, but well, here's one, that one.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so this is the DNA strand of radiation. And what it says about this is that everything is energy, and you radiate your unique frequency into the ethers so that everyone benefits from your life. The barriers are down and you're now free. So everybody just look at that glyph and ask and intend that the frequency of the DNA strand of radiation is activated for you. And I ask that your higher self work with the energetic fields and the guides to activate radiation inside you now. And I ask that all of your reference points are updated, all ways in which you perceive and you are perceived in the world. All right. So that's how it works. And so that's how I began to know about DNA, and I started working with these. Of course, I got activated as I drew them. In fact, I had so much fun. I was drawing them too fast. I actually made myself sick because I was just like, oh my God, I can draw, but yeah, so it brought me up to a newer, higher space. And then over time, what I began to realize is that not only am I a sentient being and my body's a sentient being, every cell of my body is as well. Inside the cells, the DNA is sentient too. And so you can call out to your DNA and ask your DNA to align with you in whatever it is you want to create in your life. I know you do this. You can work with the cells of your body and ask them to replicate back to their divine blueprint of wholeness. You can work with your skin cells and say, okay, skin cells, you're going to turn over every 6 weeks. So how about when you're replicating, get rid of the wrinkles and come back with, young, youthful, firm, collagen, elastin, no wrinkles, and it works.
Yeah, I know a real simple request when I do energy healing is just asking and requesting that all the way down to the DNA level, remember health, express radiant health. And we have to remember, as you say, that your body, if you're listening and watching, is intelligent. And you can request and communicate in a loving way with your body to activate your own natural healing, and just ask that all the way down to the cellular level that your body express and manifest radiant health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Jean, how does Inner Speak, your healing system that you invented, actually work?
Okay, so it's a language of the soul. And, our soul's talking to us all the time, but we don't know that language. It might as well be speaking Swahili because we hear the stuff in our head and we just assume that it's our imagination or it's monkey chatter or, whatever. So we don't listen and we don't pay attention. But what InnerSpeak does is it works like a language. It lets your higher self say this, 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 and this. And as you acknowledge those sentences or words or phrases, actually what that does is it creates light language, which speaks to the body in a way the body can understand. And it actually goes to the source of where you set blocks up for yourself. You can set an intention that I want to release the blocks around my finances or career or relationships, or you can give your higher self a laundry list of 14 things. And your higher self will acknowledge and try to clear as many of them as can be done without throwing you into a healing crisis. So the things that it will tell you are where you set the block up, what happened to you whenever that was. It might be this lifetime. It might be in another lifetime or another dimension. It might be something one of your ancestors did that you're running or you're processing for them. And then the next thing is, okay, so what did that do to you at the level of your soul? Because that's all that really counts. The soul is everlasting, and it will just develop these wonderful little coping mechanisms that will get us through difficult times. But when we're still doing it 10 minutes, 10 years, 10 lifetimes later, it's no longer necessarily appropriate. In fact, it might be very inappropriate. And then once you've defined this story, then it will say, these are the things you need to do to let this go. And these might be creative visualization. It might be using flower remedies. It might be using essential oils. It might be some sort of movement. More often than not, though, it involves forgiveness. It involves going to that place where this was created, and there only can the forgiveness happen. So if it was a lifetime where you lived in Egypt in 2300 BC, you've got to go back to 2300 BC and find that person that you were and forgive and ask forgiveness there. Doesn't do any good to do it today.
Yeah, and you and I are the same in that we both feel that forgiveness is an absolutely essential aspect of natural healing.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Course in Miracles says there are no justified resentments. So in your opinion, Jean, what role does forgiveness play in healing?
Well, it's the little key that goes into the lock and opens that lock up so that healing can take place, movement can begin, the flow can be resumed, all of those things. And it can't happen until you unlock. And the lock is slammed shut whenever there's resentment or whenever there's a judgment.
Now, there's a lot of different simple tools for forgiveness. For example, Ho'oponopono, which is a simple
huge
mantra, which is very profound. Are there any particular techniques that you recommend to help people forgive?
Just asking. going in your mind and using your intention to be forgiven and to forgive, and which is really the basis of Ho'oponopono. So, but yeah, that's what is required, is just that asking and intending that it be done, and it works every time.
Yeah. The one that I like the best, which is real simple, it's a variation on Ho'oponopono, but what I like about it is that even when you're stressed, you can remember it, which is, I forgive the name of the person. That person forgives me. I love that person. That person loves me. So even when I'm stressed, I can remember that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes, and like you said, even asking for help, just realizing we're holding on to that bitterness and resentment, and just, asking for help. Help me let this go. Yeah. What about gratitude? How does feeling grateful help us heal?
Okay, so gratitude is this amazing tool that brings you into the present moment. And nothing can happen except for in the now moment, because this is all there is. Like I said, you've got to go back to 2500 BC to do that forgiveness work, but you've got to come back to now. And so gratitude brings you to now, and it's just this wonderful salve, if you will, that it's what seals the deal. So you can do all of the healing work that you want to do. You can do it all day long for many, many, many years, but until you actually stop and say thank you to whoever's helped you, to all of the people who've been players in your life up to that point, to your guides, to your spiritual family, to whomever, nothing really happens.
So for the people out there listening and watching, can you explain, Jean, how you recommend they activate gratitude in their lives?
So, there are so many little things that you can do. And that you need gratitude anytime you're feeling bummed out or, stuck or whatever. That's a really good clue that it's time to just take a big deep breath and find at least one thing to be grateful for. And I'll tell you what, some mornings, the only thing I can come up with is, I sure am glad I'm on this side of the daisies, and I'm able to take a deep breath. Okay. But anything. But the one thing that I think is a really good habit to get into, I call it the attitude of gratitude. And, I journal every day. And so I'll start journaling in the morning, and my journal kind of runs. It sits by me in my office. It sits by me on the couch. I don't leave home without my journal. And the last thing that I do before I go to bed every night is my little attitude of gratitude. And I try to find at least 3 things to put on my list that are unique to the day, that mean something to me at the heart level. And that has been a life-changing practice for me. And so I'm happy to share that with anybody who's watching this video. I just remember that attitude of gratitude and just write down. And it really helps to write, because that engages both sides of your brain. And it really helps to write it longhand versus getting on your computer and typing it.
Yeah, I have to say that I do the same thing, where writing by hand, when you write by hand, you get into the actual feeling of it. Mm-hmm. You can also type it on the computer, but I do the same thing. What I like to do is, before I go to sleep, I like to work towards a list of 20 things I'm grateful for.
Wow.
And,
that's aggressive.
Yeah, it is. And, sometimes, you go, about 13, 14, you're like, but if I can get to 20, then I can just keep going. And it's like, It's a beautiful world that we live in. And, then you're just really just brimming with this vibration.
Yeah.
Jean, I know you have a gift for our viewers. Can you share with everyone what your gift is?
Absolutely, I've got two. So the first gift is that if you'll go on my website, jeanadrienne.com, and if you will, on the left-hand side, kind of right underneath the banner, it lets you sign up for my newsletter. If you will sign up for my newsletter, I will send you absolutely free and no expiration on this, your own link to the online version of these InnerSpeak cards. It's fully automated. You can't do them wrong. It prompts you through, tells you what each card means. And as soon as you opt in, you get that link. And I'm happy to gift that to your viewers. But the second thing is that for anybody who's watching this today, if you go on my website, on the right-hand side, right opposite that, there's a place that says Start Now. And if you click that button, it'll put you into my calendar, and I'm happy to give you a free 15-minute consultation with me, a little mini InnerSpeak session, so that you can begin the process of clearing and healing. So those are my gifts for today.
That's just very, very generous of you. We've been listening to Jean Adrienne, the developer of InnerSpeak, a very powerful healer. You can visit her website at jeanadrienne.com and definitely take advantage of these wonderful natural healing gifts. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer of CatherineCarrigan.com, UnlimitedEnergyNow.com, and What is Social Media Today. My latest book, The Difference Between Pain and Suffering, has been at #1 on Amazon for the past 19 days in 4 categories: medicine and psychology, alternative medicine reference, nutrition for cancer prevention, and acupuncture and acupressure. So thank you for listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. Remember that natural healing is here to help you feel radiantly healthy and extremely happy. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.